Welcome back to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're joining us today because, well, we're looking at one of the most fascinating organizational puzzles in all of business history. I mean, have you ever stopped and wondered how a massive corporate empire like the Walt Disney Company adapts its leadership style to match changing times and, just frankly, immense external pressures? We all know the movies, right? We know the theme parks. But the way those things are actually produced, that relies on a deeply complex, constantly evolving management structure. So let's dive right into this.
It really comes down to this single, crucial question. How do you manage the magic? It's so easy to look at Cinderella's castle and completely forget that there is a colossal corporate machine running the whole show behind the scenes. And the answer to this question actually lies in a century's worth of management theories. We're talking about theories that dictate whether everyday employees are treated as, unthinking machines just turning a crank or as empowered creators who are actively contributing to that magic. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is our roadmap for today. We'll be tracing the journey through the evolution of management theories, checking out Disney's rigid 20th century, moving into the open-minded 21st century, exploring navigating Disney's external forces, breaking down value-driven management explained, and finally, pulling out some lessons for modern managers.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the evolution of management theories.
To really understand Disney, we actually have to rewind a bit, because management theories have radically shifted over the past century. Back in the 1880s, Frederick Taylor brought this super strict engineering mindset to human labor. Then you hit the 1920s, and Max Weber and Henri Fayol introduced bureaucratic hierarchies. Think rigid, top-down, strictly ordered systems. But running parallel to them, and honestly, completely ahead of her time, was Mary Parker Follett. She was laying the groundwork for behavioral and market-based management systems that wouldn't even gain mass popularity until the 21st century. Zooming in on Frederick Taylor for a second, his concept of scientific management was all about systematically studying relationships between people and tasks to maximize efficiency. Now, during the Industrial Revolution, this was huge, a real game changer. It drastically increased factory productivity. But here's the catch, and it's a huge one. It often meant that as workers became more productive, managers just handed them more tasks without extra pay. Employees weren't seen as creative human beings. They were literally treated as breathing machines. To really grasp how intense this was, listen to this quote from Robert Iger describing Taylorism. He says it conjures up the specter of one human being exacting his will on another, seduced into merging with it. It's honestly a bit eerie, right? It's striking to realize just how cold and unyielding early 20th century management was. It favored pure efficiency and cold rationality way, way above human well-being.
Moving right along to Section 2, Disney's rigid 20th century.
So the contrast here is literally night and day. The old-school administrative view believed that the organization absolutely must conform the worker to the system. You follow the rules, you report to your boss, and that's the end of the story. The new school, though, rooted in Follett's behavioral views and modern market-based ideas, flips that on its head. It believes workers possess vital, on-the-ground knowledge. They believe the system should empower the worker, fostering bottom-up creativity instead of just top-down orders. And this brings us to a really fascinating tale of two leaders right inside Disney. Michael Eisner, who was Disney's longest-standing CEO, heavily utilized a rigid, centralized approach, making unilateral decisions. His successor, Bob Iger, took a completely different path. When Iger took over, he famously dismantled the 15-year-old Central Strategic Planning team. Why would he do that? Simply to remove creative barriers and empower the lower-level departments. Now, Eisner's autocratic style ruffled a lot of feathers. Roy Disney famously described it as a repressive regime. He felt it really stifled morale. But, and this is a very important but, we cannot entirely discount Eisner's methods. Following Walt Disney's death, the company was kind of lost. Eisner's bold, top-down crisis management style was exactly what the company needed at that specific moment in time. Get this, under his early leadership, revenues grew by 25% annually, and the stock increased tenfold. How did he pull those numbers off? Well, Eisner achieved that by implementing what former CFO Tom Staggs called the factory process. Basically, business development teams at the very top created the movie ideas, and then they strictly handed those tasks down to specific directors. This aligns perfectly with Weber and Fayol's 1920s theories. It was a rigid, top-down allocation of tasks where the big creative decisions were very closely guarded by the top executives.
Okay, let's fast forward a bit to Section 3, the open-minded 21st century.
So Bob Iger's approach was basically a masterclass in behavioral management. This is the study of how a manager's personal behavior directly motivates employees. And this goes straight back to Mary Parker Follett. She was a former social worker, and she believed a manager's behavior is directly reflected in employee performance. For Iger, it wasn't about treating people as cogs in a giant engineering puzzle. It was about humility, communication, and real human relations.
When Iger took the reins, he instituted market-based management. He decentralized the chain of command, pushed accountability down to the various departments, and get this, he publicly shared credit with his work team for helping him get the CEO job in the first place. But most importantly, he recognized that the frontline cast members, the ones actually out there interacting with guests every single day, held incredibly valuable knowledge. He empowered them to create the magic, rather than relying solely on isolated corporate executives in a boardroom. And this brilliantly illustrates our next point, Section 4, navigating Disney's external forces. You see, managers face a multi-layered reality every single day. Think of it kind of like a giant target. At the center, you have the internal stakeholders. Surrounding them is the task environment. These are the direct forces you deal with daily, like your customers, your competitors, and your suppliers. And then, forming this massive outer ring is the general environment. These are the indirect, broader forces, shifting demographics, political and legal changes, and socioeconomic factors. Managers have to monitor both of these rings constantly if they want to survive.
Let's look at how this plays out in the real world. To solve a task environment problem, namely customers hating wait times and not spending money while stuck in line, Disney whipped up the Fast Pass. Brilliant task-level solution, right? On the other hand, look at SeaWorld. They faced a massive general environment challenge when they delayed the response to the Blackfish documentary, failing to quickly navigate changing ethical expectations. Finally, looking at the political and legal environment, Disney actively lobbied for the 1998 U.S. Copyright Term Extension Act. This legally extended copyrights by 20 years, effectively creating massive barriers to entry for competitors.
Which brings us nicely to Section 5, value-driven management explained. So what happens when you synthesize all these theories together? You get value-driven management, or VDM, created by researchers Pullman and Gardner. This theory requires that employees at all levels, literally from the CEO down to the newest intern, make decisions that consider the long-term success of the organization. And they do this by carefully integrating these 8 specific stakeholder values, ranging from external cultural values right down to individual employee values.
So, how does Disney actually juggle all these VDM facets in reality? Well, first, they foster an internal culture that heavily supports creativity. For their customers, they specifically target those wholesome family values. But they also have to assess competitor values. For example, they know Universal Studios down the road targets an older, more thrill-seeking demographic, so Disney adjusts their strategy accordingly. And looking at third-party values, Disney recently extended contracts with the 30,000-member Service Trades Council union. This allowed them to smoothly navigate new federal healthcare mandates without causing a massive disruption. They are constantly balancing all these different values at the exact same time.
Finally, let's wrap this up with Section 6, lessons for modern managers. Synthesizing all of this leaves us with a few absolutely vital takeaways. If you take nothing else from this explainer, remember this. Never discount an employee's knowledge just because of their rank. The best ideas often come right from the front line. Remember that rigid, centralized hierarchies? They are highly effective during a time of company crisis, just like we saw with Michael Eisner. But true long-term success requires evolving out of that phase to share power and actually listen to your employees. You must adapt to external cultures and environments, and ultimately strive to create long-term value for multiple stakeholders all at once. Which leaves us with one final provocative thought for you today. Take a look at your own organization, or even just how you manage your own daily projects. Are you a rigid ruler stuck in the 20th century, treating people like breathing machines? Or are you an open-minded leader, ready to empower your team and embrace the complexities of the 21st century? It's a question definitely worth exploring, and perhaps value-driven management is your next great tool.